Making friends with my body. Hey, hi. I'm Angel. Thanks for stopping by my channel. I aspire to inspire you to always be reaching for your greatest, most joyous, most playful potential. And part of that is keeping a healthy body. And I know a lot about not being friends with your body because I was diagnosed with chronic incurable disease, inflammation disease, when I was prepubescent, around, I don't know, in the 10 to 12 range. I started getting hives, pretty severe. Sometimes in my throat would swell up, and I had a lacy rash over a lot of my body, and a couple of times I'd have to go to the emergency room to get a shot of adrenaline because my throat would start to close up, and I had big lumps on my face sometimes, like big hard fiery, like a bee sting kind of a lump that itched and burned and was disfiguring, and that was quite unpleasant. And so by the time I hit puberty, I was in a kind of self-hate mode, which I think happens kind of naturally at puberty sometimes anyhow, but certainly being diagnosed with a chronic incurable disease was did not help. Or did help, depending on how you look at it. But it was a reason I used to really despise my body for a long time. I felt like my body was attacking itself, like it was stupid, like it was, was something wrong with me. And I developed rheumatoid arthritis around that same time. So I had severe joint inflammation, a lot of pain, and disfiguring from a teenage point of view, hives all over my face and body. So I was ashamed of my body. I didn't want to dress out for PE. It ended up affecting my fitness. I ended up gaining weight. It was a whole cascade of self-destructive behavior that came out of that diagnosis. And it wasn't until the last 20 years or so, I'm 47 now, and probably, so I had my son when I was 24, and when I was pregnant with my son, I really started paying closer attention to my health and got off all the pills I had been on. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So in my early 20s, before I had my son, I had gotten myself off of all the prescription medications that I had been on since my teen years. I was on Benadryl when it was still, before it was over the counter. I was taking like 12 Benadryl a day, so I spent a lot of my teen years in a real haze. And then I added alcohol to that. In my early teens, I had some abuse issues and I was self-mutilating. I was, kind of really not happy with my body, not friends with my body. I was battling inside. Um, and deciding to have my son, and then having my son healthily, was a big turning point for me of really taking more personal responsibility for my health, realizing that the systems that are out there just didn't have the knowledge to help me. They were just basically either making things worse or just biding time, and really making things worse by giving me negative diagnoses and no hope for getting better. And I'd seen many different types of doctors, specialists, and I heard a lot of, well, I don't know what to tell you, which was really disheartening growing up. And so I really had a lot of self-blame, a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-loathing, and I took that out of myself through self-abuse, basically, and through, and then it manifested in me participating in abusive relationships, being, mugged and raped, also just outside of relationships, just, the world saw me as a victim and started to victimize me. And I was arrested, I was beat up, I was raped more than once, all those things. And in that process, I came to realize that nobody else was going to be able to save me. Nobody else was going to be able to help me if I didn't help myself. And just a little side note, that doesn't mean that nobody can help me at all. I'm very grateful for the help that I have received and am receiving and probably will receive in the future. But unless you're willing to help yourself, until I was willing to help myself and take that responsibility on for myself, I couldn't really receive help from anyone else, or the help that the others tried to give me was reduced greatly and far less, far less had less of a positive effect. Um, and then after I became a mother, of course, I became, much more committed to having a healthy life and being okay with myself, and not being, you know, consumed with self-loathing, because that's not a good way to be a good mom, obviously. And I wanted to set a good example for my son. So I started to do lots of research, and luckily about then the internet came along, so it was easier and easier to find information from other people who were suffering from similar conditions. And by then the hives had kind of evolved into a lot more rheumatoid arthritis. And then by the time I was 30, I had some uterine cysts, I had pelvic inflammatory disease, just general inflammation, kind of brain fog a lot of the time. And when I was around 30, I had such severe pain in my pelvis around my ovaries. I guess I had an ovarian cyst. I never really did find out for sure, because while I went in to address that, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. First, thyroid nodules, and then they wanted to remove my thyroid and put me on medicine. And I did a lot of research on that and decided, I'll keep the removal as a backup plan if it ever gets really bad. But there's no reversing that, to my knowledge, at this point. So I decided to get even more serious about taking my own health into my hands, and about really making friends with my body, because I started to realize I want to live in this body. I'm not sure how much of me is this body. It really seems like maybe this is just purely a vessel made up of other sentient beings. And yet there is a symbiotic relationship. This is my body, the feeling that I get anyway. And I know most of you can probably relate, because you also live in a body. And I'm fascinated by how sometimes the spirit, or the my will be mean to the body, or abuse the body, or push the body beyond where it wants to go, and vice versa. I have seen the will, or the spirit, be so weak or so down and so wanting to escape the body, and yet the body fights death, fights to survive, even if the will wants to die. I've seen that a number of times with suicide attempts. So it's fascinating to me, and I don't know the answer, but I do know that when I talk about it, when I think about it, it seems like my body and I are connected, but not the same total thing. And so the idea of being friends with my body, learning to communicate with my body, is something that I've learned is important for me to increase the odds that I have a healthy, happy life, basically. So back to my life story, which apparently I'm gotten into now with regards to making friends with my body. Sometime after the whole thyroid thing, when I then took my health even more seriously into my own hands, and by then I'd already become a massage therapist and gotten into Chinese medicine and was studying herbology on my own. And so I was starting to eat healthier. I'd done a lot of liver detoxification, which I think really, really helped with the skin stuff, and started to pay more attention to my gut health, which in this day and age, most of us know is kind of the beginning, the front line of most autoimmune type of issues, or allergy type of issues, is that your gut lining gets damaged either from antibiotics or from eating a really terrible imbalanced diet. And then things can get through that gut lining that aren't meant to get through into your digestive system. That activates the immune system, and you get sensitivities to various things, as well as symptoms like brain fog, inflammation throughout at different points of the body. Generally, inflammation will go to, you're going to notice it in the weakest point or the most damaged point first. So in my case, spilled out my liver into my skin first, and then into all my joints, and then into my reproductive system, and then into my thyroid. And lately I've been having like pancreas and gallbladder, internal organ pains for the last many years. And in my around my 40s, at age 40, I took up snowboarding. And I also started some outdoor big mega-sculptures, I call them, these big projects. And in the doing of those two things, I broke some bones a couple of times. I hurt my ankles twice, and I broke my ribs on each side, and a couple years apart. Anyway, I had some really life altering. The ankles weren't life threatening really, unless they got infected or something. But the ribs were scary for a while, and the pain was intense on both of those. And being self-employed and not having any insurance, I had to still work through it. And I was working on these big projects. So in all cases, it was about 4 times that I had really significant injuries that put me back pretty far, where I had to walk, with support, or I couldn't sleep very well, where I was in a lot of agony for at least several weeks in each of those instances. And how I got through those times was talking to my body, basically. I developed a whole new level of love and appreciation and desire to communicate effectively with my body as I realized that there was healing going on that was beyond the scope of my ability to perceive. And I had to, trust my body and ask my body what it needed and just give it that, whether it was nutrients or rest or exercise. There was a balance. And those experiences in the last decade or so, around a decade or so, has really brought me to a whole nother level of love and respect and appreciation for my own body, and desire to communicate effectively in both directions, to listen to my body, because I think it's more than I am. It has a different perspective. It's made out of sentient beings, my organs, my cells. There's senses that I get a read on, if you will, that I tell myself a conscious story about in my thinking. And then there's also all these things that are going on that are outside of my conscious perception, that are still having a significant impact on how I feel, how I act, how I look, how my life is. And so I'm really dedicated the last decade, even more than the decade before that, which I also was, to having a loving, healthy relationship with my body. And all that was to say, I hope that you are developing a loving, healthy relationship with your body. And even if you're somewhere on that spectrum, I'm here to tell you, I've been somebody who I literally carved into my body, cut myself to get out of PE because I was ashamed of other people seeing my body, because into my thinking it was hideous. So I've indulged and victimized myself in a whole lot of self-loathing, body shaming, and all of that. And then flip side, I feel like I embody every goddess lately on a good day. I really can breathe deeply and trust this body, and know that my body's trusting me, that we're working together to enjoy a beautiful, dynamic, evolving life full of goodness, full of deliciousness, full of good experiences, nice sensory input. I look at beautiful things, I touch, I get touched, I eat deliciousness, I smell wonderful things. All those are dynamic, loving collaborations between myself and my body. And I really encourage you to develop and continue developing. I don't think we're ever done. Just like any healthy relationship, it's an ongoing, evolving relationship. So I hope that you and your body are getting along good, communicating well, showing each other how much you love each other. And I'd love to know in the comments, what do you do to communicate with your body, to listen to your body? Do you meditate? Do you exercise? Do you just breathe? Do you just intuitively have that? I think we all kind of have different mixtures of how we get along, how we navigate our way in these bodies through life. And so I'd love to know what your experiences are, what your thoughts are on all that I just said. And also, please don't forget to subscribe, and you can find some links down in the comments below if you want to hire me for a consult, or shop in my eBay store, or follow an Amazon link, or buy my music or some of my books. All that should be down in the description. And until next time, I wish you loving relationships, peaceful possibilities, potential, playfulness, and productivity.